What's happening, Cardinal Nation? Welcome back to the Cardinal Call Podcast, a classroom podcast with expert leaders designed to help take your leadership and your learning to the next level. Let me start with a quote today. Never be limited by other people's limited imaginations. That quote was stated by Dr. Mae Jemison, the first African American female astronaut. With February being Black History Month, you really don't want to miss any of our special guests this month that we interview. We went out and found some of the top leaders in the community and within the university who were not held back by other people's imaginations for them. These men and these women are doing a phenomenal work, and you don't want to miss this special Black History Month edition of the Cardinal Call Podcast. I am Dr. C. Sean Owens, also known by my moniker right below, at the Professor Owens. And I want to bring in my co-host, the incomparable, the one, the only, Dr. Andrew McCart. Dr. McCart, how you doing today?
Dr. Owens, I'm doing great. Thank you for bringing me in. And I'm, as always, excited about this guest that we've got lined up here. Someone who's doing a lot of great work out in the community. And I don't want to speak for this person because they're going to be on here and give us a lot of nuggets and wisdom, as usual, for leadership and learning for the audience.
No doubt. I'm excited about our guest as well. But we also want to let our viewers know that we will kick off this month with our brand new initiative called Faculty First Fridays, where we will interview a faculty member and they will give you some great insight into what they're doing and how they're going to make an impact to make the world a better place. So let me give a brief introduction of today's guest. Obviously, with today being our first Faculty Friday, he is a faculty member within the OLO program at the University of Louisville. His first career was not actually education. It was actually in journalism. He's doing a phenomenal work. He also serves as one of our diversity leaders for our OLO program. He's teaching courses, trying to make the world a better place and understanding that diversity is key and critical in everything we're doing. So get your pens, get your pads, get your iPads, your pencils, your papers, however you take notes, and get ready to learn from one of the top leaders we have on campus. This is the one, the only, Dr. Randy Whetstone. Dr. Whetstone, how you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you all for having me.
So, Dr. Whetstone, here on the leadership, on the Cardinal Call podcast, we want to jump right in right away talking about leadership. So let's get started with this. How do you define leadership?
Mm-hmm. When thinking about defining leadership and this term, a simple common definition that I use and that comes to mind is leadership is simply having the ability to influence others. What I would add to that at the end is the ability to influence others to a desired outcome or goal. And that can be either positive or negative. And so if you have the ability to influence others, you're a leader, in my opinion. The question is, what is your end goal? What is your outcome? And where are you leading people to? That's the question. And so simple, straight to the point, the ability to influence others.
That's a great answer. But I love how you brought in the outcome. Right. I think a lot of times we read books, we read articles. Dr. McCart, go ahead and chime in. But they don't always jump right to the outcome. They just say leadership is influence, and we're just kind of left guessing. Dr. McCart, what do you think?
Well, I like that you made it. You said short, simple, and to the point. And I think whenever it gets too complicated, I think we're straying a little bit from what actually some of the basic tenets of leadership, which are being in touch with the people that you are leading, and determine what their needs are and the needs of the organization or the bigger picture, and aligning kind of all of what our purpose is and aligning that with the sort of the bigger purpose that we're all working on together and finding the best way to match those up. So it really can be simple, although it's a billion-dollar industry teaching and learning about leadership. But, well, let me ask you this, Dr. Whetstone. So you told us a little bit about your definition. Sometimes it can be easier for us to think about it in terms of a person, but who, one or two people, best exemplifies this definition of leadership that you gave us?
Yeah. One person in particular that comes to mind just in my personal life is I would have to say is my pastor, Pastor Dr. Walter Malone Jr. He's the pastor of Canaan Christian Church in Louisville, Kentucky, and he's been in leadership for 40 plus years. And I've been able to sit back and watch his leadership, not only here locally, but even on a national and international stage. And it's a type of leadership style as a servant leader and charismatic leader where you're able to sit back, and although you may not be getting the X's and O's of leadership taught to you directly, there are a lot of things that are caught that just by watching, listening, looking, and learning, you're able to definitely grasp and apply to your leadership. So I would say that from a personal standpoint. And from a professional standpoint, I would definitely say that I've been under some great leadership of organizations that I have worked at. I've definitely respected and have admired, whether I've been close to the leader or watched from afar. I've definitely admired their commitment and their grind and the sacrifice and even the burden that they carry as a leader. And so I'm happy to say that I think that the leaders I have been under over the course of my career have certainly played a major role in helping me to be where I am today.
I appreciate that. And I'm glad you mentioned sort of the grind and the consistency and the individual. You mentioned your pastor with a 40-year track record in leadership. It's one thing that I think we have to overcome when, and our program's primarily adult learners, but there's a feeling in our society that if you haven't made it by the time you're 25 or you haven't made it by the time you're 30 and cashed out with a big social media acquisition or something, then you're somehow behind. And
Right.
I think that's actually is a dangerous way of thinking, because it's there's really no shortcut to anywhere worth going. And I think that grind and that commitment and that serving others over a period of time creates a track record that as a leader you can point to. So I'm glad you mentioned that part of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Dr. Owens, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's amazing. I think there was some great insight there, especially when you mentioned your pastor. I mean, there's a quote out there by Marian Anderson that says that leadership should be born out of the understanding of the needs of those who would be affected by it. And I think that, you tied that right directly into, like a pastor who obviously is serving the needs of the community, as well as other leaders that you have been around and served with. So knowing that, can you tell us a little bit about your leadership journey and kind of how that led you to the University of Louisville?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you had mentioned earlier as part of my intro, which I really appreciated, Dr. Owens, as well. But you had mentioned, my background being in journalism, and I did have the opportunity to do some freelance journalism work for about a few years or so when I was in undergrad and really leading all the way up into the tail end of my graduate studies. But honestly, I would have to say it started there. When you have the responsibility of informing the public with knowledge, but my philosophy, accurate knowledge, that is leadership, right? Because you're influencing the thinking of the community and the general public based on what you're writing. And so I think that there's a bit of integrity that comes along with journalism. And so for me, I took that as the beginning part of leadership when I was conducting interviews and writing articles and submitting columns. I'm leading in that way. That experience, then led into when I started teaching in higher ed around the age of 25 is when I actually first started teaching. I laugh because I still remember my first day teaching in the class and how nervous I was. And so it was a humbling experience, but it just added more to the leadership duties and responsibilities. And so teaching as an adjunct eventually led to teaching more classes and a lot more classes. I'll say that, to where I eventually became a part of an institution's administration. And so prior to teaching at the University of Louisville, I was the director of the Christian Service Program at Simmons College of Kentucky, which is the 107th nation's historically Black college and university. So shout out to the HBCUs.
Definitely.
Where I had the opportunity to work on the administrative side of things, and definitely learn more leadership skills along the way. All of that has propelled me now, a year in, at U of L, a little over a year now. And I've definitely just continued to learn a lot about me as a leader, as well as just learning more about leadership in general, from the responsibilities that I have here, the interactions I'm able to have with colleagues, as well as other part-time lecturers that we have, and some of the service opportunities that I have as well. So I would say all of that combined has led me to where I am today as a leader, and where I'm headed going forward also.
That's awesome. So you're telling me at 25, alluding to what Dr. McCart just said, you didn't have that huge buyout from a social media, so you didn't create some $1 billion idea, right?
No, man. I went in with my mind, my heart, my life experience, and at the end of the day, going to bed at night, having peace that you were authentically you and you did your best, and that's where I was at 25.
Sweet. Dr. McCart, I don't want to steal all the questions.
Yeah, no, that was I like that. And as someone who gets in front of crowds for a living, I can understand being nervous in the classroom and still do. They say an audience is they're like horses. They can smell if you're afraid of them, and they'll turn on you if you're not careful. So you gotta work on that presence. Or one has to. So I've got a question for you. You mentioned journalism, having a background in journalism, and you wrote a recent article for the Courier Journal, and it was published, and I had an opportunity to read it and enjoyed it. But it was about living in America, and it followed the theme of the Rocky movies and Apollo Creed, and from that scene where he's going, they play that, I believe, James Brown song about living in America. And it was a great article. People should go out there and find it. What were you hoping to, and I assume you're just an educator, even as a journalist, what message did you want to get across? And what do you think that sentiment of living in America, especially for Black men, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I did get the opportunity to publish an op-ed in the Courier Journal, and it felt good because I had a little bit of a hiatus with journalism, and I decided to just dust off the pen and get back into the lab, so to speak. And as you said, my inspiration came from one of my favorite films, the Rocky series, and with this particular column, Rocky IV. So just to provide a little bit of context, for those who may have not seen the movie, Rocky IV, included his once arch nemesis, Apollo Creed, who was wanting to come out of retirement. He wanted to dust off his boxing gloves, get back into the ring, and he apparently met his match in the Russian mammoth, Ivan Drago. And so in the events leading up to this fight, and really the fight itself, there was a ring entrance of Apollo Creed that included James Brown. Now, the significance of that moment in the movie is because you had two different countries clashing together. You had the Soviet Union, the Russians at that time, and then you had the United States. And so what Apollo was trying to convey in his entrance was American pride and what it means to embrace this nation that we call the United States of America. But in my reflection, what was so ironic to me was that you had James Brown in the movie and Apollo Creed, both who were Black men, conveying the lyrics of the song Living in America. Living in the America. That's the song. And if you look at the lyrics talk about how wonderful the life is for a person living in the United States. Mm-hmm. Now, granted, the United States having so much power, influence, and really opportunity is wonderful. But the question is, are all those things experienced the same way, or is there the equity that is needed across all different people that live in the United States in different walks of life?
Mhm.
And so being a black man and watching that movie and two black men singing how wonderful it is, I just felt that there was some contradiction there for sure. Thinking about where we at that time when I wrote it, 2020,
Mhm.
and how far we have come, not only as the black community but also as black men in this nation. To where can we really say that the lyrics of that song apply to the black community? And so I know that the nation, especially in 2020, there was this rising of social unrest, and really, I believe 2020 was a year of, people said perfect vision in January. I still believe that to this day, because what 2020 provided was greater clarity. And what we saw clearer was a lot of ugly things in the United States that are still prevalent. And so I felt the need to make people more aware and cognizant of the reality of what it means to be black and living in America, even though some of the issues that we saw with police brutality, etc., although some of the stuff had subsided, I actually published an article. The article actually published the week of the election. And I
Mhm.
did that intentionally because even though it wasn't right in front of us, the riots and the things that were happening, something that I've noticed is that when problems have happened in our nation around race, we give our attention to it for the moment, but these issues, it's a movement, it's not a moment. And
Mhm.
so what I think the nation needs to understand is our attention to creating racial equity. You shouldn't just feel passionate about it when something happens, right? But that you should develop a lifestyle where you are embracing, right, what it means to be culturally competent, being aware of systems in place that are not in favor of people in color, and not just let it be on your mind when it's on national news. And so that was my goal, just to keep it fresh on the minds of people, and to know that each day issues and problems are happening that plague the black community. So I know that was a long answer, and I got a little passionate there, but yeah, that was certainly the inspiration behind that piece.
No, that was a great answer, and I think that what you're saying is exactly right. That uh, things will, there'll be an outcry, and and then things have a way of going back to normal.
Yeah.
And there's definitely there's wisdom in what you said about it needs to be a movement and not a moment. And
Mhm.
I think there's still a lot of work to be done.
Yeah.
Dr. Owens, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that was a great answer. I don't definitely want to build on that. Just to give a little bit of a commercial break for a quick second. But if you or someone want to learn to lead with compassion and expertise, like we're just talking about, and understanding that the world is changing, and in obtaining a degree, right, from an award-winning faculty in a nationally recognized program, you can check us out and you can learn more about us at uofl.me/BSOLL-podcast. Listen, leadership is real and leadership is changing in society every day, and we all know that. And so now that we understand a little bit about your leadership journey, we understand a little bit about your passion. I want to ask you a question, because Nelson Mandela made this quote. He said, education is the most powerful weapon you can use to change the world. So knowing that, as a professor, right, as a
Mhm.
professor, how does learning occur to you?
Mhm. Yeah. I think learning occurs, and I'll keep this simple as well. When you're at a place where you're able to teach what you have learned to others, I think you have learned, right?
Mhm.
And when you can apply knowledge and content in a practical setting, and whether it be through trial and error or you effectively complete the task, you have learned. And so learning is a process. There's a lot of different ways in which we measure and assess learning, but
Mhm.
those are two things that I look at. When you can teach it to someone else and you can apply it effectively, I believe that you have learned.
Okay. Okay. I like that. I like that. So when you hear the quote that Mandela put out there, that education is the most powerful weapon which we can use to change the world. What is your stance? What I mean, how do you when you hear that? What jumps off at you? What leaps inside of you?
Yeah. Well, I think that's the reason I went into education, because I believe that knowledge is power. And I
Mhm.
believe that the more knowledge we have, the more empowered we become. And not just knowledge in a specific discipline or area of expertise, but being well knowledgeable, in a widespread array of disciplines and topics, discussions, all types of things that are happening in and around our world. I
Mhm.
believe that the more knowledge we gain, the more empowered we become, and and with that empowerment, there's more of a claim and a grasp that I believe that we can have for life and for our own life, right? That we feel more firm and in position of who we are, where we are, and where we want to go. And I believe that a lot of that information comes by way of education and
Mhm.
by knowledge. And when we speak of education, that just doesn't mean in an organizational structure or format like higher education.
Mhm.
I see education as just a means of obtaining and getting knowledge, and that can come through higher ed, that can come from reading books, that can come from watching videos on YouTube, where you're learning content and getting information. Education can come by way of lived experiences as well. And so I always want to encourage students and people in general that in all that you do, get knowledge, get
Mhm.
get understanding, get
Mhm.
information, process it, do research, learn, and work all those mental muscles. Because I remember when I was in elementary school, they would come and talk to us in school and say, the mind is a terrible thing to waste. And I always thought that they were referring to like drugs and alcohol, right? But when
Mhm.
I got into my adult life, I realized that no, when we are not using our mind and challenging our thinking and intellect in a way in which we're growing, we're wasting our mind. We are. And the worst thing we can do is remain in a place of vulnerable ignorance, where
Mhm.
systems and people can take advantage because they know what we do not know, right? And
Right.
so because of that, we have to try to get as much knowledge as we can to to be empowered as a people.
Okay. Okay. Dr. McCart, what you got?
Well, I'm starting to get excited. This is inspiring, Dr. Whetstone. I really appreciate that. And um, I want to comment on something you said there about learning and many things you said. And I agree with you that it's a process of growth and expansion, and
Mhm.
that we have to open our mind, as you say. You used a lot of words that could be synonyms for growth, expansion, opening. And I think somewhere along the line, I'll call it the educational industrial complex turned into, you need to sit there quietly, you need to listen, you need to take this information, regurgitate it. And to me, that's like a feeling of contraction and kind of closing off and being fear based, really. And so, one thing I love about the organizational leadership and learning program at the University of Louisville, it's an adult education program. We focus on developing leaders and getting them to grow, and we work side by side with them. More of I think, a coaching process,
Mhm.
or a coach on the sidelines of their life to help them succeed, rather than the sage on the stage where we just give information, expected to give it back to us. So that's a little bit of a long comment on what you said, but what are some things that you like about this program, the Organizational Leadership and Learning Program at the University of Louisville, and what are some things you want students and the community to know about this? And you can either talk about your role that you play in diversity, or guiding the team of part-time lecturers and working that way. Anything that you want to tell us, what would that be about this program?
Yeah, first and foremost, what I love is the opportunity to engage and interact with students. It's all about the student with for me. And so I love that our students in the OLO program come hungry for knowledge, but knowledge that they can use to impact their respective organizations. I love that, because a lot of the work that they do and the assignments that they complete in classes are real life professional issues and challenges that simultaneously they are solving while taking the class that semester. So I think that's the most wonderful thing, to literally be a part of that experience of equipping leaders and continuing to hone the skills that our students who are leaders that they already have. And again, being able to play a part as their coach, in a sense, as their professor, as their advisor, as that if you use the boxing analogy, we're the trainer in their corner before they go into another round of work and dealing whatever opposition, obstacles, or opponents that they may face. That's fun. That's certainly fun. What I would add to that is that, the OLL program, I believe, is just a special and unique program that has tremendous benefits for anyone on the face of the earth, literally. What I love also are students who may have a lot of work experience. They may have some college credits, maybe, that they have earned already, but maybe they just don't have the degree. And that whatever apprehension that they may have, I believe the OLL program speaks to that you can finish and complete what you have started or what you set out as a goal in getting this bachelor's degree. And so because of that, I'm always just talking to people when I'm out in public, learning about just a little bit about their life and their background, and particularly where they want to go in the future, and thinking how the OLL program could be a fit for them, because organizational leadership, that applies to any and every field. And in any and every field, you have leadership. You have leaders. And so because of that, I think this program is a great and ideal fit for just about anyone. And if you're interested, I'll just go ahead and add that if you're interested in going back to school or being a part of the OLL program, then we would be more than happy to have you as a student here at U of L for sure.
Yeah, go ahead and throw that quick commercial out there for us. Listen, I'll tell you right now, Dr. Whetstone said it best. I don't need to say anything else, but if you're looking to get your bachelor's degree or your master's degree, you can check us out at uofl.me/podcast-OLL. That's just, he gave the commercial, so I just went and put it out there for us. Dr. Whetstone, let me ask you this, continuing and keeping the flow of the conversation going and learning before we transition to our next piece. So you kind of mentioned assessment a little bit ago, and but we know that the world is big in assessment and data collection. Actually, I was with you last night in a meeting where we were actually teaching. They're teaching people how to understand big data and algorithms and things like that. But knowing that we work with adult learners in the OLL program, what do you think is the best way to kind of assess students in the OLL program to gauge? Not to gauge if they're smart. We know they're smart because they came to the University of Louisville. But how do we gauge their learning? What is the best way, right? Is it a test? Is it a quiz? Is it, like you mentioned, some of them are coming to us with real life work experience, and does a quiz and a test do that? Or, tell us what you think.
I really think, I'm going to be totally honest. I really think that one of the best ways to assess learning for adult students, and particularly students of the OLL program, is in a practical setting. I wish there was a way that I could see you implementing what you're learning in your professional life. Quizzes, tests, assignments like that. There are so many ways in which you can do well on those, but it doesn't mean that you've learned anything. Right. Some people just know how to take tests. They know how to complete it, but it doesn't mean that they've taken the information, the content, processed it, and have been able to implement it successfully in the workplace. The question is, what is the true test? Is it the written test that we've always done in education, or is it, well, I'm now faced with a situation that I have to apply what I've learned, right? So I think that's a good question that higher ed has to think about more so, because again, you may have passed a written test, but does that mean that you've been a failure professionally with those tests based on the knowledge that you have gained? And so I wish there's a way that I could see that, that I could see all my students each day, and not only them, but even myself, how well, because accountability is key with leadership, but how well am I taking what I've learned and using it?
Right.
Because if it's not being used, if we're not doing anything with it, what good is it really at the end of the day?
That's a great answer. Dr. McCart, anything you want to?
Well, yeah, I'll mention that I really agree with what you're saying there, Dr. Whetstone, and how in our program, I appreciate that we've got that hallmark assessment task at the end where people have to put the things that they've learned in the class into a real life situation and demonstrate that they do have those competencies and those capabilities, whether it's project management or developing a human resource plan to set up a situation to select and acquire the right kind of talent that you need. So I agree with you, and I think we can be proud that our program does that. So, well, I want to. Dr. Whetstone, were you going to?
And I was going to say, I want to add to that I do also agree that I think that's our HAT is a great assessment for students, because it does challenge them to take the concepts that they're learning and be able to articulate in their writing that they've made meaning of what that is. And like you said, Dr. McCart, being able to apply it to real life situations and scenarios. And so I think that's an excellent way for students to show and to display their learning. And I'm really big on writing, probably because of my journalism background, but I always tell students, you have to be able to read and write, and writing is going to be required in whatever you do and wherever you go, for sure. So I certainly agree with you there.
Well, yeah, great point. And I do a lot of writing, whether it's emails or whether it's reports or putting something together. I do that throughout the day and throughout the week, but I don't get a lot of multiple choice exams in my life these days. So I think it is. And on a serious note, the bias and some of the problems that we see with multiple choice exams, standardized testing, I think that you lose a lot of those inherent biases that come with those instruments whenever you do the hallmark assessment task, when you're doing a project related to your work and doing the writing or presenting. We have an option in some of our classes where people present the information as well. So, well, let me ask you a question, Dr. Whetstone. That's I know you want to talk about it because I've seen you speak on this, but you're involved. And let me provide some context. Dr. Owens knows I like to build up these questions, and so I'll get into this a little bit. But there was a story, a leadership author that I was listening to, and he was talking about for goal setting and successful goal setting, you want to be able to visualize and see yourself there. That's one of the first steps, believing that you can get there. And so there was a story about someone came from New Orleans or Louisiana and became a billionaire, and then provided scholarships for everybody from his former high school that wanted to go to the local college there. I believe it was Tulane, or I believe is what it was. And no one was taking him up on this scholarship offer. And they couldn't figure out it was a free opportunity to go to college, and they wouldn't take him up on it. So what they started to do is, when the kids were in elementary school and junior high, they gave them tours of the college and let them meet professors and see what it was like, so they could see themselves as someone that would fit in at college and be there. And so that's a long way of saying that I think whenever we're pursuing something, we want to see someone like us, and we want to be able to relate to, whether it's higher education or whether it's something else, a similar achievable goal. And I think that you're doing that with the Black Male Equity Network that you're working on. You're working with Dr. Craddock, who's a friend of ours in the college as well. And I would like you to just talk a little bit about the mission, some of the things that you've achieved for that, and what that looks like in the next year. And do you have plans to grow that initiative?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So the Black Male Equity Network formed around last summer. with our colleague. A special shout out to Dr. Douglas Craddock, who really had the vision from his doctoral journey at Alabama, where he said that, he felt that he was one of one in his PhD program as a Black man. And so that formed just kind of this group of a handful of Black males, me included, who either had a terminal degree or they were currently in a PhD program. The other gentlemen include Malcolm Muhammad, who's a PhD student in the business school, Jerron Jones, as well as Devonte Carson, who are both PhD students at Bellarmine University. And we all came together and we said, this is a shared experience that we have, that there are not many people that look like us in doctoral programs. And we want to do something to increase our presence. And so we thought of the Black Male Equity Network as a way to form a network of Black men who either already have doctoral degrees or who are currently in a program, or those who are thinking about pursuing a doctoral degree, and building a network where we can support, engage, and build with these gentlemen. A big passion of mine in this network is not only to increase the presence of Black men getting doctoral degrees, but also to rewrite the narrative of what Black men look like in America. And so when this group kind of formed organically last summer, it was literally in the heart and the midst of a lot of the racial unrest that was emerging in our nation, with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and the list goes on. And so for someone who grew up literally in the hood in the West End of Louisville, Kentucky, growing up in the ghetto, you're not expected to go to college, let alone get a doctorate, let alone teach at the University of Louisville. Right. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart, because coming from the California neighborhood, I am beyond an anomaly. I am beyond an outlier. It's a miracle coming from where I come from, one of the poorest zip codes in the state of Kentucky. And so seeing some things that I've seen growing up with young Black men who have been killed by gunfire and Black on Black crime before they reach the age of 30, those are things that I carry. Those are things that I feel. And if I'm in the position to make some type of difference and there was an outlet for me, then I have a responsibility for my brothers who come from the environment in which I grew up in. And so my personal charge and responsibility is that if there is anything that I can do to help serve another Black man, but especially a Black man who's looking to get a doctorate, that's life-changing. That's life-changing for a Black man in the United States. And so because of that, we've been able to just work with some schools in K through 12. We've been able to connect with students across multiple schools in Louisville and even in other states such as Florida and Indiana and Texas, men who have just come across our network. And, moving forward, we just look to continue to build the network. We have been able to provide some good virtual sessions to provide wraparound services for men who are thinking about this doctoral journey. And, we hope to just keep growing, keep building, and keep doing what we're doing until it starts to just become a norm that Black men get doctorates and not a surprise or, oh my gosh, I can't believe you have a PhD. But no, it's a norm. It's normal.
Thank you for that, Dr. Whetstone. And I know the College of Education and Human Development is proud of that initiative, and I hope it continues to grow in the work that you and Dr. Craddock are doing. I have no doubt that it will. So, yeah, thank you for that. Thanks for elaborating here for the audience and the podcast. Dr. Owens?
Yeah, I mean, that was a great question, Dr. McCart, by the way. And to give a little bit of statistical analysis, I believe if this number is still the same, I know they haven't compiled for 2020 yet, but I know going into 2019, Dr. Whetstone, you may know this, that less than 1% of African-American males have a terminal degree of any kind. So we are at just below 0.01. Hopefully, 2020 saw that at least hit that 0.01%. And that was interesting. I love your passion that you have for diversity. I don't want to I guess feel comfortable. I want you to feel comfortable telling us any part of your story about diversity. But knowing that, you want to ask you this, because you do lead a lot of our diversity classes here at the University of Louisville in the OLO program, and you obviously doing diversity work outside outside of University of Louisville. What kind of sparked that interest? What made you aware? How did you know? So why is diversity so important to you? And then kind of tell our listeners why it should be important to them.
Yeah, absolutely. When I was working on my master's, I took a class that was called intercultural communications.
Mm-hmm.
And I took this class prior to a short-term missions trip that I was taking to Dubai, UAE, United Arab Emirates. Mm-hmm. And that class was literally life-changing. That class prepared me to leave American soil for the first time in my life and be in a culture and a context where the worldview is completely different than all you have known. And I learned a lot of key terms like microaggressions and misattribution and all these terms that just challenged everything that I thought I knew about life and about people. And when I had the chance to go to Dubai, not only was the trip, mind-blowing and incredible, but that is what literally sparked diversity for me. Being in a Muslim context and in a country so far away from the United States that was a culture shock, to say the least. Mm-hmm. I just took from that experience so much that, I said, this needs to be applied like in the US. Like, we need to be cognizant of all of the differences of any prejudice we may have, any unintentional discrimination we may have, mm-hmm. how we communicate with people from various cultures, just the importance of cultural competence, because everyone does not come from the same worldview or set of beliefs or values that we have, right? And it made me think, is there any way in which I have unintentionally offended someone who may be different in any way on the basis of gender, race, sexual orientation, religious beliefs, socioeconomic status? The list goes on. Mm-hmm. Have I unintentionally offended someone just because of what I don't know, right, about them or whatever that difference may be? And so because of that, I've made it, my goal to embrace diversity. And when we talk about and hear diversity, we tend to kind of focus solely on race, but diversity encompasses so much more. And I have challenged myself personally to make it my goal to learn about any and all things concerning diversity, even if it's something that may not, be with my set of beliefs. That doesn't matter. That doesn't mean I can't get informed. And I think that's a problem in our society. That's what I want people to know, is that when it comes to embracing diversity, doesn't mean you have to adopt a different philosophy or a set of beliefs from your own, but it does mean that you're growing as a critical thinker to be aware and cognizant of the differences around you, because people's beliefs and their values, they matter when it comes to interdependence and us getting along and making sure that we function effectively in organizations, right? It's important to understand that diversity, because if somebody doesn't feel comfortable working in that organization because of the color of their skin, their gender, their sexual orientation, or what they believe concerning religion, that's going to have an impact on how effective and efficient that organization can be. And so I think that it's important that we embrace people, even if you disagree with practice, right? Mm-hmm. That still embrace and welcome people, even if you don't agree with their practice. And so I love diversity. I love the topic. I do teach diversity in the workplace, which is a part of the Cardinal Core at the University of Louisville. So I get the chance to learn and grow with students all across the entire university, in addition to our OLL students. And so I love the course, and I love getting the opportunity to work with our students in this particular area.
Amazing, amazing. And I'm just gonna ask you this part. Hopefully, you can answer it as quickly or as long as you need. But I know we have a very similar background in that we both worked at historically Black colleges and universities. I personally worked at two: Central State University in Ohio and North Carolina Central University in North Carolina. So, could you kind of expound a little bit on, I know you've worked at HBCU. This is obviously Black History Month. Can you expound on a little bit how working at HBCU prepared you for life and leadership?
Yeah, I'll keep it short and sweet. The experience, because I didn't get a chance to attend a HBCU, but when I worked at a HBCU, I felt like that was my student experience in a sense. And what it taught me, straight to the point, is never forget your background and your heritage. Right. And that in all you do, right, that you constantly keep at the forefront of your mind the plight of the Black community. Right. But I love historically Black colleges and universities. They were set in place at a time when opportunities were far and few for, Black people, in America. And they still have a very important place in our nation today. And so the biggest thing for me, again, never forgetting where I come from, my background, and, just the Black community in general.
Sweet. Dr. McCart, what do you got?
Well, thank you, Dr. Owens. That was a great question. And Randy, I really have learned a lot here. I've seen you present as part of your interview process when you came on here, but you're really getting me excited and make me want to take that course that you teach. There's nowhere to get in; it's already filled up. So it must be a very popular course. Now, I know we could move things if someone wants to get in, but I have some questions related to that course, and I know you're the person to provide some insight on it. So some statistics here first. So Black professionals in 2018 held just 3.3% of all executive or senior leadership roles, which that's 2 reporting levels of the CEO. So really not even at the highest level, but it's only 3.3%. And among Fortune 500 companies, less than 1% of CEOs are Black. And over the past 2 decades, there have only been 17 Black CEOs, and only one of those has been a woman. And that was Ursula Burns, who ran Xerox from 2009 to 2016. And then the last thing I'll say is that board members of Fortune 500 companies or the S&P 500, more than a third of S&P 500 companies do not have any Black board members whatsoever. So I think that goes back to something we were talking about earlier about all the work that is to be done. What do you do in the classroom to help people understand those statistics and the importance of making a difference in those areas? Because the marketplace is certainly made up of more diversity than what I just indicated with those statistics. How do we, as organizational leaders, become better and make our companies, our organizations, our nonprofits better by having a more diverse representation at the highest levels?
Yeah. Well, what you just mentioned, Dr. McCart, there is an assignment in the diversity class that literally speaks directly to that data you just gave. There is an assignment where students are required to go out and learn about the diversity breakdown in Fortune 500 companies. And they get to see those who are in senior executive leadership positions and how diverse that may look. And what I've challenged students to also do is to think about what systems are in place that if in any way has created any type of glass ceiling in some of the most powerful and wealthy businesses that run our country and run the world. Think about its history, its background, and what they have done to propel their image as an organization. And students get that opportunity. They get that opportunity for sure. And then you had asked a question about the things that we need to know as leaders and as in terms of organizations as it pertains to diversity as well?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, I think that for every leader in the United States, I think what is so key is that the nation is becoming more and more diverse. It's not going away. We're becoming more diverse, not less diverse, whether a person likes it or not. Right? Let's just call it how it is. Even if we don't like it, the nation is becoming more and more diverse, and so there's going to be more differences in the workplace. So I hope that every company, large or small, small startup business versus some of the biggest Fortune 500 companies that we see are making an effort to make DEI a top priority for their organization. Because if not, sooner or later, you're going to be faced with a challenge that includes diversity. And if it's not a priority, you're ill-equipped to handle it. And that may affect how you function and operate as an organization.
Wow. Thank you for that. And I want to spring another question here, Dr. Owens. I'll jump the line here and ask a question. So someone like me who, a white male and middle-aged, I'll have to admit, if you couldn't tell, but I don't often just my race doesn't, I don't have to worry about my race or my gender very often at all. And I feel like that's really a privilege. How can someone in my background be an ally in these initiatives that you're talking about, whether it's the Black Male Equity Network, the journal article that you wrote on living in America? How can we be a part of that without being or coming across as disingenuous by not understanding the plight of someone that came from your background, or the things that Dr. Owens has been through? Does my question make sense? And am I being coherent? And hopefully you can shed some light if they're for me, and it's a genuine question, and also for people that they want to help but don't know how.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think a key word that you used was understanding the privilege. And I think that that's so key for, the white community, not being shy of the fact or ignoring the fact that there is a privilege that is there. Right. And so understanding that is key. And I also think that listening is so very important. I think a lot of problems that I think have happened as a result of maybe white men being in power is making decisions for people and they don't know their lifestyle at all, whether it be government, top organizations, and things of that nature. I think that's one of the biggest problems that have happened. Having your own idea of what you think people of color experience are going through. Therefore, because I have the power, I then decide what will happen in your life and what outcomes will happen. And so I think just listening and learning from lifestyles and experiences and making it a personal goal to be involved. I want to be involved to help people of color or minorities or issues that even though I may not directly be able to identify with, I'm walking alongside with you and working alongside with you. And that is key. One thing I always say about the civil rights movement with Dr. King is that he had a lot of clergy, he had a lot of Black brothers and sisters, but there were a lot of white allies as well who played an integral part to pushing the needle for the Black community. Whether it meant at that time, whether it meant being hosed down, being willing, let me say it like this, being willing to sacrifice all that you have gained because of your privilege, because of equity of your fellow brother or sister who may be Black or brown or whatever it may be. That happened. That happened in the civil rights movement. It may have not been many, but there were some. And that made a huge difference, because when you understand that privilege and you understand the power that can come along with that, but yet there's that sacrifice to walk alongside others, that's when certain decisions, I believe, can start to be made that will kind of start to break the foundation of systems that have led to inequities, where we start to challenge others in power. Because as a white person, I'm now taking a stand, right, against these things that are bad. Even though I've privileged from it, you know what? It's still bad. And if I have to sacrifice so that we have this equity, then so be it. But the question is, how often are people willing to, take that type of courage and step forward if the risk is, my reputation is on the line, or I may lose certain things, or my finances are impacted. And that's where we start getting into, things about values and things of that nature. But yeah, those are just some of my thoughts about that.
I appreciate that. And I've got to talk about this sometimes. I've got a public health background and a business background. And really, any of our problems are all of our problems. And you mentioned that sticking your neck out in these ways can maybe impact your reputation or your finances, but not doing anything also does as well. And so I think being on the right side of history is going to be really important as we march forward as really a human race. So, well, Dr. Owens, I'll hand it back to you, but I want to say I really, because Randy's my friend, I was a little more casual about this interview, but my goodness, we're getting just as much knowledge as we have any of our guests, and I've got some studying to do. So I'll hand it back over to you, Dr. Owens, as we reach our time here.
Oh, no problem. No problem. Listen, on the Cardinal Call podcast, we definitely talk about leadership. We talk about learning. We let our guests talk about the area of expertise they have. With Dr. Whetstone, you've learned a lot about diversity today. But, one thing we always like to do is we always want to have a little bit of fun, right? And so we always have, one or two fun questions. So we're going to ask you just one of our fun questions today. And let me see here. I'm going to randomly select this one. Here we go. If your life was the title of a book, made up or real, what would it be and why?
I would have to say living with unlimited possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
Living with unlimited possibilities. And I say that because I could break down each key word, but I won't for the sake of time. But the key word is living, and living, the best version of your life, being the best that you can be, chasing goals, not being afraid of risk that may be involved of the goals, plunging yourself out there into the world and just living as full as you can be, and who you are, your identity, your skills, makeup, abilities, your potential, and being free in that. Not just a free bird where you're just flying around, but you're free of any type of thing that limits or pigeonholes you into some type of status quo. That's living, to me. And then along with that, with limitless possibilities, right? That you're always thinking about what can be, and then considering the work that you're doing to bring that dream into fruition. So living with limitless possibilities. I have literally seen that happen and manifest in my life personally. So that'll be my pick.
Man, that's amazing. That's amazing. Well, Dr. McCart, is there anything you would like to say before we before we kind of end our interview with Dr. Randy Whetstone before he changes the world,
Thank you, Dr. Owens, for a chance to kind of sign out here. But Randy, it's great to have you here. And it's just a blessing to have you as part of our team here in the OLL program at the College of Education and Human Development. You help me out a ton. I know you help Dr. Carrick, our department chair, a lot. And I'm just really glad you're here. And I'm so glad to get to know you a little better through this last hour of conversation. So thanks for coming on here.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all. And my U of L team is incredible. Like I can't put anything into words that describes, how elated I am every day, literally, to get the chance to work with such great people. So, you are awesome. Keep doing what you're doing. And, we all work together to change the world for sure.
No doubt. Well, thank you, Dr. Whetstone. You have a great day, and good luck changing the world.
Thank you.
Dr. McCart, OMG, as the texters out there say. I think that stands for oh my gosh or something along those lines. What did you take away from the day?
Gosh, well, a lot of I'd say over the overarching thing is just what an asset Dr. Whetstone is to this program, and all the insights that he had, and the good work that he's doing there. So I've never seen you teach. I've never seen Dr. Whetstone teach. That's one of the things. We're in meetings all week long, but we don't see really in our strengths. We don't get an opportunity to see that. And I felt like we got to see that today. And there's so many takeaways from the work that he's doing in the classroom to push diversity in organizations, to the things he's doing in the community with mentoring Black men to obtain education. What did you think? Some takeaways that you had?
Man, I thought it was great. I thought everything from his journalism background to writing the article of Living in America. I think our listeners are going to really have a lot of nuggets after this, whether it be from leadership perspective, whether understanding influence and outcomes, whether it be from the learning perspective, and understanding that, pretty much like Dr. Whetstone, one road doesn't determine where you're going to end up. Like, he started off in journalism and now he's teaching and doing some phenomenal stuff with diversity and everything like that. So I think if you just really unpack this segment, this podcast, there are so many hidden gems in here that it could really change the lives of any one of our students, whether you're Black, white, purple, green, or yellow. It's going to impact your life, and it's going to have, a lasting impact. Saying all that, the University of Louisville here offers and fosters leadership, learning, and performance to relevant solutions for a changing world. As we've discussed, the world is definitely changing. We offer programs in bachelor's, master's, and at the doctoral level. Our programs educate professionals who focus on leadership, organizational development, human resources, and workforce development in order to benefit individuals, organizations, and society. For that, you can check us out at uofl.me/ELEOD-OLL. Again, that's uofl.me/ELEOD-OLL. Dr. McCart, what are your closing thoughts?
Well, the closing thoughts, it kind of builds on what Dr. Whetstone and you said about you don't always know where the path is going to lead, but I think that you may not even be able to see the top of the staircase, but you take the next step and suit up and show up and keep going and do what lights your life up, and where you can find a bigger purpose in things. And I think even if you don't know the specifics, you'll be moving in the right direction there. So I'm just grateful to be here. Thanks for letting me saddle up next to you in the booth, and I'll keep showing up as long as you'll invite me, Dr. Owens.
Hey, well, the invite is going to be here for a very long time, Dr. McCart. And as we say around here, you can count the number of seeds in an apple, but you can't count the number of apples in the seeds. When you teach, you'll never know how many lives you will influence. And it's clear Dr. Whetstone is influencing lots of lives. So Cardinal Nation, keep leading, keep learning, keep influencing, and we hope to see you soon. But until then, like, subscribe, share, and leave comments so that you're updated when we have new podcasts that are released every Friday and information connected to the OLL program. Take care and stay safe.